It is Locked On Jazz for the 8th of September. Big T, Thurl Bailey's back in the house talking Utah Jazz basketball. Plus, early season schedule. Can the Jazz take advantage of a coaching edge? And Marc Stein's power rankings have some interesting notes, plus a Ben Simmons thought or two. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Ba-dum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can subscribe at Locked On Jazz, plus Apple, Spotify, Google, CastBox, wherever you get your podcasts, all for free and available on all platforms. It's your team every day. Today's show brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. Well, the Jazz launched their, NFT virtual locker room yesterday. Sold out in 45 minutes. It's a new world. They did their, it's cool. It's cool. Shows kind of the modern end of where the Jazz are and what's taking place. Pretty wild, exciting stuff to see there. Definitely beginning to get back in the swing of things, fire up a little bit. I've started a little bit of pregame prep and looking at teams and breaking out who they are. And we did the points gain last week. I'll have to look at the East coming up here pretty soon. So we're getting close. Training camp is media days, probably less than 20 days away. I haven't heard exactly, but I mean, it is time to ramp up. I'm guessing media days coming. Yeah, I mean, it's at the latest date media day would be the 27th of September, probably, with the way the season is. With your first game, the 4th. So it's less than 20 days away. Let's go, baby. Interesting thing I was looking at was with the schedule. There's a few things, and we'll dig into it a little bit more this week. I looked at some interesting metrics, but one thing is there's so many first-year head coaches in the NBA this year, and coaching in the NBA is really hard. And they're not going to be very good at first. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be good eventually, but Terry Stotts, who's one of the better coaches in the league, not in the league this year, was a lot better by his 7th, 8th year in Portland than he was in his first year in Milwaukee or Atlanta. I think when you look at Mike Malone in Sacramento, is now letting the players play a little bit more and do more in Denver than he ever did in Sacramento. Quin Snyder's better, today than he was in his first year. That's one of the elite coaches in the NBA. So when you suddenly look at the amount of new coaches that are in the league and who has, first year head coaches, Portland, New Orleans, Orlando, like there's a run of coaches, and you look at the Jazz schedule, it's to me, if they can get in the first 30 games, some games against first year head coaches, it would be a massive advantage. And I looked at it, and there's one little pack right at the turn of November into December where they get a ton, but otherwise not really. So they play Orlando on the 7th of November at Orlando on the back end of a back-to-back with Miami. The fact is the Jazz actually kind of open up with, they see Oklahoma City, Sacramento, Denver, Houston, Chicago, Milwaukee, then sack again. We get sacked 3 times super early, which is not good because as Matt Moore of Locked On Nuggets says, they haven't looked in the mirror yet to realize who they are. Early in the year, teams are, playing kind of with this belief that they're good. Everyone thinks they're good to start the year. And then eventually they look in the mirror and realize, oh, actually I'm not. And they kind of fall back. And it's better to play. I feel like it's better to play the good teams early when they might be coasting, and the best and the bad teams late when they've looked in, as Matt says, when they've looked in the mirror and realized they're not good. I kind of feel like our schedule is the opposite of that. Though we finished with a pretty hard run of, Dallas, Clippers, Lakers, Golden State, Memphis, OKC's not there, Phoenix, Portland late. But then again, those teams might be set and established and you're not getting, so we'll see. You never know late. I think playing bad teams early is bad. I will hold to that. So we don't really get if you look at us, we have Nate McMillan in Atlanta, then Rick Carlisle in Indiana, then Spoelstra in Miami, then Doc in Philly, and then Nick Nurse, then Luke Walton for the third time, and then Taylor Jenkins in Memphis, who's a great coach, OKC. Then we get a little run. This is where it is. New Orleans back-to-back with a new head coach. Portland with a new head coach. Boston with a new head coach. Cleveland with J.B. Bickerstaff. Minnesota with Finch, who will have had some experience. Philadelphia, then Washington with a new head coach. So we have a little span in there to take advantage of, but it's not as early packed as you might hope it to be. Ben Simmons, I'm getting a lot of ask people, can we do anything for Ben Simmons? Yeah, Rudy Gobert. So that's your choice. Like if you want Ben Simmons, you're going to have to go do a Rudy Gobert deal for Ben Simmons. That would be the way in which you would do that deal. And suddenly Ben Simmons plays center, but he's not really a very good pick and roll player. So you'd have to do it, in some different way. He's really, the place for him to go is Minnesota and be with Karl Anthony Towns. If I was Minnesota, I would just say you can have everything on my roster other than Karl Anthony Towns and whatever amount of picks you want, and put Ben Simmons and Karl Anthony Towns together. I think Ben Simmons is going to be great. If I was a team, I would love to go get Ben Simmons, unless it cost me Rudy Gobert. Then I don't want Ben Simmons. But if I'm someone else, if I'm Golden State, I'm unloading some of those young players for Ben Simmons and let him and Draymond play off as kind of that mutual. It's hard to have both of them on the floor at the same time, but I would, Draymond's aging a little bit. Ben Simmons is my future. I might be willing to move Draymond, frankly. Give me Ben Simmons with Steph Curry and let us go. Now, again, he's not great on the pick and roll because you just switch it because he's, but then he'll post you up. He killed us that way. I'm big in the Ben Simmons camp of this guy is still great. Sure, he can't shoot. There's a lot of problems, a lot of flaws. Let's look at all his strengths. His strengths are 1 in a million. 6'10", handle, play any of 5 positions, defend any of 5 positions. Just outstanding. So, and frankly, he might be, instead of being blasted by a team he'd be loved and cared about, might be a good guy to have. Marc Stein, who does a Substack, has got a power ranking out. And I thought it was interesting. So Bucks, Nets 1-2, Lakers 3. Again, I've been pretty outspoken on this. Maybe from a playoff standpoint, I put them as 3, but I don't see them as the favorite in the West at all. And I'll say it again. And I might turn out to be crazily wrong. And I'll laugh at myself and look back like, how after 27 years in the NBA did I make this mistake? But I actually see them as having to compete for a play-in. Suns is 4, hard to dispute. I think the Suns look, now Chris Paul injuries, but we've got every one of these teams has old players. That's what makes a really good team. Probably the Bucks don't, but the Nets, you're worrying about Kyrie and is Harden's hamstring an issue. The Lakers, you're worrying about LeBron's age and every single other guy that's on the geriatric circle that has AARP sending him stuff. The Suns, you're worrying about Chris Paul. The Heat, who he has at 5, you're worrying about Lowry at 35 and Butler at 32. He has the Hawks at 6. That's a team where you're not worrying about a lot of age stuff. That's pretty interesting. Jazz at 7, number 3 in the West. Hard to quibble with. Nuggets and Clippers at 8-9. And as I've said, I think the Nuggets and Clippers are far better than people realize. The only question to me is whether or not the burden on Paul George of being the number 1 guy will wear him out. But I don't think so at this stage in his career. And I don't think the burden of being number 1 and number 2 is going to wear out Michael Porter Jr. and Jokic. In fact, I think Porter will thrive on it. I think Denver's going to be very, very good. And while Jamal Murray is terrific, I just don't think they're going to miss him that much. The key for Denver is going to be their next tier of players. They've lost a lot of them through trades. Can they be above average offensively? For the Clippers, it's not a challenge. Reggie Jackson, Nicholas Batum, Morris, Zubac, they've got it. You distribute Kawhi's 20 possessions. I'm not worried about them at all. He has the Sixers at 10, the Knicks at 11, the Warriors at 12, the Mavericks at 13, which I feel like with Marc Stein being out of Denver as close as he is, he almost might artificially put them down. I think Dallas is jet Dallas up. They had terrible COVID run last year. They did lose Josh Richardson in the offseason. I can't imagine Porzingis can be any worse than he was last year. Doncic can only be better. The only thing I don't like about Portland is their coaching. Jason Kidd was really terrible as a head coach in this league the 2 times in which he was a head coach previously. And so that's my concern. The roster, the composition, if Rick Carlisle was the head coach of that team again, I would have Dallas at like 6, 5, 6, maybe ahead of Utah. Like that would be kind of my team I'd be selecting to move forward in the Western Conference. I do question whether Kidd's ready to be that guy. Warriors at 12 is lower than most people have them, and I kind of agree with that, as I've said a few times before. Boston at 14, super interesting. I've got to analyze this. They added Josh Richardson, had a bad year last year, but Al Horford's a good addition. Enes Kanter's a great backup center, and they might not even use him. They have Robert Williams. I'm a little confused on how they're using their pieces because Robert Williams got signed and it was Horford playing the 4. So there's a little, but Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum are still super good. And, Marcus Smart, Kemba Walker wasn't great last year. It's a name loss. It's interesting to me, the various storylines that are going on that I don't feel like are very number-based. So the Lakers and their great roster, I don't think is very numbers-based. The Nuggets and the Clippers descending is not very number-based. Portland descending is not very number-based. That's the number one offense in the NBA after they added Norm Powell. So he's got them at like 18. I don't see that either. Like, I am thumbs up on Portland, Dallas, Denver, and LA. Thumbs down on Lakers and Warriors in the West compared to where the trend of everybody is. All right, we'll keep talking about Thurl Bailey joins us. We'll have some good conversation with Thurl about Rudy Gay. We'll get into Donovan. We got 2 more days with Thurl. He's the best, and we super appreciate his time. Today's show is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. The Chevy lineup of trucks is simply unequaled. We all know how great Murdochs have been with over 80 years in Utah, and the family brand and the family name so important that they want to make sure that you have a no regrets experience every single time you head over to Murdoch Chevy. And they've got the Chevy Colorado and the Chevy Silverado, 2 of the great trucks of all time, the SUV lineup. What else do you need to know about the Suburban and the Tahoe? But there's also the Traverse, the Trax they've done a great job with. So, and the Equinox is kind of maybe the unsung hero in that lineup of SUVs and what's going on there with Murdoch Chevy. So go check it out. Woods Cross, also located in Logan. If you're going to head over there, feel free to email me first. By the way, on that Equinox, 0% for 72 months or $3,000 cash allowance. So both pretty good deals. I mentioned the truck month is going on right now. The 2021 Silverado, $1,750 cash allowance or $1,000 accessory allowance. And the truck month is going on here, and it is truck month in September. So feel free to jump over to Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. Today's show is also brought to you by Sweat Block, a product that's been out for a long time. In fact, if you go to Amazon, there's 13,000 reviews, and now's your chance to go to sweatblock.com and get a promo with promo code LOCKEDON, get 20% off. There's a few things we don't like to talk about. Excessive sweating is an embarrassing situation that just can make it uncomfortable to go out and be places and do things, and Sweat Block will answer that. It can be for adults. It can be for your teenagers. It can be for men. It can be for women. It can be for a single big-time presentation that's going to cause you to feel this way, or it can be a daily issue. Sweat Block is stronger and more effective than most clinical antiperspirants. You simply apply at night before bedtime. Go to bed. The next morning, you wake up, wash, and go about your day without worrying about sweat. Guaranteed. It is the dry shirt guarantee. If Sweat Block doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. Go check it out at sweatblock.com. Promo code locked on. Here's Big T, Thurl Bailey. It's day 2 with Thurl Bailey on Locked On Jazz. One of the great pleasures in my life. I still tell the story all the time, was Thanksgiving. We're in Memphis. And we're having dinner in Memphis in Thanksgiving. And so everyone's FaceTiming back to family. First off, wonderful event. Thank you to the Jazz. And it's a great example of our organization, Quin Snyder and the Millers at the time, that we were on the road in Thanksgiving, and they took the time to give us this great dinner in Memphis. We're all together, obviously all wishing we were with family. But had our family, our little family that we haven't actually gotten to have together here for a little while. And so I'm FaceTiming back. Everyone's FaceTiming back during dinner. And my wife is with her family, and my brother-in-law's like, "That's Thurl Bailey. You're with Thurl Bailey." I mean, the only thing that I think would have sent him through the roof more is if I somehow threw him George Gervin, because that was his favorite. He had Iceman poster and 44 shirts as a kid, Thurl Bailey. And then my father-in-law comes by. He's like, "It's Thurl Bailey." They were like,
"Oh, that's good." I remember that was a good time. That was a good time.
Legend he is. It's so fun to hang out with you. All right, we were talking about Rudy yesterday. I think this is so interesting, and I worry that sometimes we're almost asking too much. This is the burden he has of making $35 million, right, or $40 million now. Is that we're going to ask for a little bit more out of a guy that's nearly perfect, and I feel a little bit like that's where we are on this, because really there's one fundamental thing we need him to do offensively, and that is that when they switch and there's a smaller guy on him and the smaller guy is between him and the basket and he's at 5 feet, he needs to be able to score over him. Right now, if there's someone between him and the basket, it's really a struggle for him to score. But at the same time, like, what are all the things that make him so unbelievably great? His athleticism, the way he runs the floor. You talked about his IQ, but I'm just doing physical stuff. His multiple actions, his quick reaction. Well, all of those, like, have a little bit to do with the fact that he doesn't have the biggest base in the world. He's a little lanky. He's pretty quick. He's bouncy. He's got and some of the things we're asking out of him is actually what we want out of like a big based center who can put his feet down, hold his ground, power over you. He can get better at that, but I get nervous if you suddenly start accentuating that or change his weight training, you actually lose some of the things that make him so great. And maybe we should just stop and be like, okay, all of the things that make you the greatest defensive player in the game today, one of the 3 or 4 greatest defensive players in the world, one of the great rim rollers the game's ever seen, are actually the same things that unfortunately mean you're not great at this skill, and we've just got to accept that.
Well, yeah, I think one approach is, Rudy, whatever you're doing, just continue to do more of it, right, on a consistent basis. But one of the things that we're not talking about are the things that are unseen, the things that his presence, just his presence brings, right? We can't read the mind of the guy who decided not to go in there because Rudy's in the paint.
Oh, I can read it. I can read it. I'm scared. Dribble. Ah!
Yeah, okay. I'm with you on that. But, you know, we always talk about, whether it's cliche-ish or not with him, the things that he does that don't show up on the stat sheet. It's just true, and we can't really, you know, quantify those because they never happen because he's out there, or you know, it just changes the scheme of what a player may have done. But you notice that when Rudy's on the bench. They attack, you know, and so that's probably, it may be one of his biggest assets is his presence on the court, and so you know, we know he's a double machine, and you know, I've said this for a long time. He's going to get a triple-double. Almost did it this past season with block shots, but you know, I just don't think you overdo it. I think Rudy understands that he has to be better every year, and whether it's his mindset or whether it's adding something else, whether it's a push shot right in front of the rim, that he's got to bring something different. I think Karl was the best example of that. Karl Malone, he always brought something different. The older he got, it wasn't just about power anymore, right? It was about learning how to, you know, shoot that jump shot and turn around jump shot and find other ways to score. But but Rudy, you know, he's young enough to where he's physically, I think he still can make some improvements, just being stronger in his upper body. But yeah, I mean, I think we know, you know, 85, maybe 90% what we're going to get from him. It just has to be better every year and more of it.
You mentioned it. It was almost uncomfortable as a fan of the Jazz and frankly a fan of Derek Favors last year to watch when Favors came in the game, teams just attacked. Now, part of it's Favors 6'10". He doesn't have the lift he once had. So it's hard to figure out, like, is that just that Rudy was out of the game or Derek was lacking a little? I'm just not sure, frankly. 3 years ago, Favors was one of the best rim defenders in the league as well. But it was so clear the minute Rudy left the game, people just attacked. Hassan Whiteside is 7'1" with like a 7'7" standing reach. He has kind of evolved out of the weakness he had early in his career where he tried to block everything and frankly allowed more points than he should have just because he was overly jumpy. Like, do you think what do you think happens now when Gobert leaves the game and a 7'1" guy instead of a 6'10" guy is who's replacing him at the rim and a 7'7" wingspan? Like, do you think that they actually almost get better defensively? I mean, they were in the 26th percentile other than my Spanish grades, nobody ever sees this as a grade. 26th percentile defensively when Rudy was off the floor last year. So, like, if that gets better, if they're 50th percentile on those minutes, wow, that's a big difference. Like, do you think Hassan Whiteside, just by pure length, can do that?
I think he can. I think he has the capability. I think we've seen it versus the Jazz, versus other teams. I think the biggest thing, couple things really. The most important thing for Hassan will be from the neck up for me, right? Coming to play, having that same type of, and maybe he's in a really good place to do it now, having that real sense of, that Rudy has in a way, having that sense of pride every single night to come out and be the very best you can be, even if it doesn't work out. But that mental approach is going to be amazing. With what we know analytically from Whiteside is that he's been here. See, he's been here, he's been here, he's been here, and he's been here. But sometimes as a player, you just need to be in a place that can push you. And Rudy could be that guy that, can be right next to you to say, I'm challenging you tonight. I'm challenging. Let's see, and of course, minutes are going to be a thing. I think with Derek, that was sort of one of the things that didn't allow us maybe to see all of the best again of Derek Favors was that you knew Rudy was going to get most of that time, and you probably weren't going to see them out there together a lot. So, yeah, I think when I saw that that transaction with Whiteside, I'm like okay, and I'm like, okay, I can't wait to see what that brings. So, I think it's a possibility that those two together on the same team, that could be frightening for other teams.
The two things are going to be hardest for him, and you did it in your career, so I'd be curious your thoughts. And then one, I don't know if I'm assuming you never did in your career. So here are the two things. If you look at Whiteside's career, like in Portland 2 years ago, he's playing 34. He's really good. He goes to Sacramento in a limited role, and it just doesn't work at all. I mean, they banish him. Yeah. So going from and we saw Derek, at least my opinion, like I thought he lost a little, like only playing 14 minutes a night, kind of lost a little zest along the way. Maybe he would disagree. If he does, I apologize. The other part, so part one of this, Thurl, is what is it like? You did it. You were largely a bench player, but you went from 32 in the last 2 years in Minnesota. You were down to 15. Like, that's just a really different feeling. Like, how hard is that? And then part two of that is the Jazz have discovered this fabulous thing with Rudy where he plays 3 stints. It's great for Rudy, right? He's playing 6, he's playing 6, he's playing 6 to close it. It also means the guy in between's playing 3 and 3 minute stints. Like, so two things here. How hard will it be for Whiteside to try to stay engaged at 12 or 14 a night? And then two, how hard is it for him to stay engaged when your 12 or 14 a night is 3, 4, 3, 4 as your minutes played each time you're on the floor?
Well, that's another tough job the coaches have. Like, Quin Snyder, I think, has really done a great job thus far of, and we're not in that locker room. So I would say he's done a great job of having guys accept their roles, right? Everybody wants to play. And everybody wants to play a lot, but not everybody will. And so I think part of that will be how Hassan accepts his role, right? And so I think it could be good. I mean, Quin's just a fabulous communicator. He's fabulous in bringing his guys together and not being about them. It's about everybody. So I don't think that'll be an issue. But I think with Hassan in this new role on this new team, understanding how this team is made up and how they win, right? It's really going to be about how he goes out and carries out how his job, regardless of what the minutes are. I don't expect him to be like Sacramento, but I think he's in a place now where Quin's going to help him thrive again alongside another great defender, and they'll figure out a way to make it work out.
And there's a big young guy pushing him. Azubuike is pretty good in summer league. He's pushing.
Azubuike.
All right, more with Thurl. Huh? Doke dunk. The doke dunk. Thurl Bailey with us. I'll tell a funny Jeff Hornacek story and see if Thurl relates to that. And then we'll talk about Rudy Gay's veteran appearance on that. And then Thurl will stay with us. By the way, we'll touch on Donovan. His next up. He's heading toward Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal. We'll probably do that later in the week, talking about it. Thurl Bailey here on Locked on Jazz. More still coming on the show as we'll talk about a little story Jeff Hornacek told me about coming off the bench. Please send at Big T Bailey a thank you for all of his time on the show. I took a lot of his time when we hung out that day. So please, at Big T Bailey, please feel free. Please send him a thank you. He's just such a great, you know what I love about him? You know why he was such a great player? Think about what a great broadcaster he's become. He just gets better and better every year, doing an amazing job on the Jazz broadcast. It's his commitment to excellence. He works at it so hard. What's his voice? How is he going to bring his personality out? How does he energize the fans? He was incredible on the desk with Alema. He's been great with Bowler. He just keeps getting better and better. It's cool to see. Like, it's so fun to work with guys like Thurl. Like, Ron Boone is 72 years old and still busts his ass every day to get better at this job. It's such an inspiration for someone like myself to see these guys work this hard and just get better and better all the time. It's kind of awesome. Hey, speaking of that, you might want to get better and better at your daily fantasy game. Well, then start playing Stat Hero instead, because did you know that 85% of people who play daily fantasy sports lose? It's really not that surprising. That game is completely rigged against you. It's not because you're a loser. It's because you're playing against thousands of other lineups, not to mention experts. So Stat Hero lets you become a winner. It's the first ever daily fantasy game that puts the player in control and winning within reach. Here's how it works. Stat Hero shows your lineups and dares you to beat them. It's you versus the house, and it's head-to-head fantasy matchup. You name the stakes, winner take all. You have the advantage. Stat Hero is showing you their lineups ahead of time. No one else does that. So you're in total control. Stat Hero is the DFS, the way it's meant to be, one-on-one. Play Stat Hero and change the odds in your favor. Go to stathero.com/lockedon. Sign up for free right now. You can get 3 times back on your first play. That's giving you 300% match. That's unheard of. So go to stathero.com/lockedon. That's stathero.com/lockedon. Today's show is also brought to you by our good friends at Rock Auto. 20 years in the business of doing it for serving the do-it-yourselfers and the professionals with the same treatment. Whether it's brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, new carpet, windshield wipers, or whatever your car might need, a fuel pump on the Honda Odyssey is $353 in the chain store and $216 from Rock Auto. So why choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% more on some parts by going into a store or a car dealership or a chain store when Rock Auto is there for you? Family business, serving you for 20 years, the same for do-it-yourselfers as it is for the experts. So go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On, the How'd You Hear About Us box, please. That's Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us box, and find out what Rock Auto can do for you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. It's rockauto.com. Continue with Thurl Bailey. So I mentioned Jeff Hornacek. Jeff said to me once, I think we were at dinner in Denver when he was a coach, and he said, you know, what happened is I used to drive to the arena every night and be like, all right, got to go, got to play, got to go, here we go. If I'm not good tonight, we're going to get humiliated. Like, I got to go. And he's like, then all of a sudden I drove the arena and I was like, so yeah, I'll contribute tonight. Like, he's like, it's what happens. Like, you get older in your career and you suddenly realize you're not as important. And it's like hard. And I mean, I actually think there was an element of that. Like, I think we actually saw a little bit was Mike couldn't find his role in his first year. He was trying to figure out how to do that. But like, it's really interesting to me. So Hassan Whiteside, we were just talking about, he's got to like drive to the arena and figure out how he's going to be his best in 12 minutes. The ones that are fascinating me are these guys who like Rudy Gay, who's clearly a basketball chameleon. Like, if you look at his stats, like, oh, this year my team needs this year my team needs this year my team needs that. Like, how is it that you, as you go through this evolution, I don't know if you felt that as a player yourself, like from being like massively impactful, one of the 3 or 4 most impactful guys on the floor, to one of the pieces psychologically, what is that battle?
Well, I like the way you put that when you describe Rudy Gay as a basketball chameleon. I'm not sure that I really ever went through that phase. I mean, when I was with the Jazz, right? My rookie year was the first year we made the playoffs, so I was a very important part of that development and the role I played as a first-round draft pick, and kind of the changing of Utah Jazz basketball. And every year that got more important. And then, Frank Layden came and asked me if I would come off the bench. And that was after he had asked a couple of guys already. They said no. And so
that story,
I accepted that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I embraced it, right? Did I like it? When he first came to me, no. I mean, like, in your mind, your ego starts talking to you. No, you're a first-round pick, bro. You're supposed to be starting. But my true self was, listen, I'll do whatever it takes for our team to win. And what became clear to me, D, was that it wasn't necessarily about who started. It was who finished, right? And I knew I was going to get the minutes. And, Booner calls them starter minutes or whatever. But I knew I was going to get the minutes. And, even that ego part basically would say, well, coming off the bench takes you out of, some of the accolades or what have you. But it wasn't about that. It was about us wanting to win. I said, Frank, sure, whatever you need. And that's when I embraced the role. And as I look at guys like Jordan Clarkson doing that as well, it's just, it's fun to watch those guys understand what that means. But when I went to Minnesota, it was totally different because they weren't winning any games. And it really wasn't about winning right away, right? They had pretty good draft picks, and Christian Laettner and Isaiah Rider. Those guys were going to get minutes. They were going to play. Here comes an older guy from Utah. We know he can come off the bench, so we'll give him a role. And I was effective in the minutes that I got, but I also understood that it was about a youth movement as well. And as much as I tried to shave the gray out, I was still getting, up there in age. So I think it's different than kind of what you see with a guy like Rudy Gay in this day and age of basketball, being able to be that chameleon and fill those roles and be effective in it, and understand that, maybe your best years are gone, but man, you're still effective in this game. And I think even with this Quin Snyder team that he's on right now, it'll even be more effective, right? Because of what the makeup is and the philosophy of this team, that when a lot of guys do well, the Jazz normally win.
Isaiah Rider and Christian Laettner in the same, I hadn't thought about this. Isaiah Rider obviously has had tumultuous items along the way. Christian Laettner has been self-portrayed as a grandiose, let's be, on the 30 for 30, he basically admitted he was a grandiose jerk. It was probably a better word. Like, wow, I'm looking. And you had Scotty Brooks and Ty Corbin, who are like two of the nicer guys I've ever met in my whole life. That's one of the, I don't know if that's the exact same locker room. I'm just trying to remember guys on that team. I'm actually pulling it up right now.
Tyrone came here for me.
Oh yeah, that's right. So you didn't have by the time you got Isaiah Rider and Christian Laettner on the same, you didn't actually. Oh, you had Chuck Person, who I was with when he checked himself into a game because he didn't like the coaching of a game in Seattle. He didn't like what Paul Westphal was doing, so he actually checked himself in. This is great. And you had Felton, who's one of the nicer guys I've ever met. And Luke Longley was like trying to find surfing in Minnesota that sucked on the frozen beaches of the Great Lakes. Well, and you're winning
other than the basketball.
Wow, that is. Thurl, when's the book coming out?
Other than the basketball, it was pretty interesting year. And then my longtime teammate from NC State took over as head coach.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I've mixed and matched 3 years of Timberwolves players in there, by the way. Scotty Brooks wasn't with Isaiah Rider and Christian Laettner. I just want to be clear on this. I kind of realize that. You bring up. But it is like, I am just like, when you said that, like, now, like, we know what we know now, right? So now looking back on Christian Laettner and kind of the way he's, as I said, self-portrayed, and Isaiah's struggles have obviously been, they're public and whatever they might be. Those are your two dominant forces in the locker room. That must have been something else.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was drama everywhere you turn. And being a veteran, just kind of being a part of that and trying to step up as a leader, right? And there's this guy that, came from a winning program, and they're trying to bring some of that in the locker room. And, sometimes it was effective. I actually got to be really, really good friends with Christian Laettner and got to know that other side of him that I enjoyed being with. Isaiah or JR, it was his way, or, you show up practice when you wanted to. And I mean, it was just, you ran off the court when you didn't like something, ran in the locker room. The GM had to go get you. So yeah, I'm starting on the book now, D.
All right. By the way, this is like why we need to be back on the road, just because you get these stories and have these conversations. One of to Rudy Gay, and I want to know what you think his involvement would be, but I really was impressed when we interviewed Rudy Gay via Zoom. He reminded me a little bit of, like, first of all, he came off to me as a total basketball savant. Like, his sudden understanding of how, like, what teams needed and how he'd fit in and things like that, I thought was really interesting. It reminded me of a conversation I had with Vince Carter many years ago, where I was talking to Vince, like, how do you go from this role to that? He's like, well, I love the game, so I just had to figure out. He's like, there's other guys, and he literally kind of talked about Tracy McGrady, who said, I don't think he loved the game that much. So for him to not be scoring, he loved scoring 24. He didn't really love the game. And so when he wasn't scoring 24 anymore, he didn't really want to be a part of it the same way. And if you look, like, whereas Vince was like, I just love the game and being around the game. So if I clearly can't score 24 anymore, so I'm going to figure out what my role is and what I can do inside of it as long as I can. I feel like that's where Rudy, at least that's how Rudy Gay came across to me. How do you think that guy helps the team? What does Rudy Gay do for this group, regular season, and maybe most importantly, playoffs?
Well, I think first, when you've played that long, it's about embracing your basketball mortality, right? It's about saying, I'm not the same player I was 4 or 5 years ago. How can I fit in? How can I adjust? How can I not just collect a check by sitting on the bench? I can still be effective in this game because I love it. And I think when you look at Rudy Gay's career, a lot of people, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago thought that, he's close to being done. But he's found a way. He's accepted the fact that it's not going to be, that 20 points, maybe not even that 20 minutes in some cases. But I can still be effective in the game with what I know I can do, whether it's in a short time or whether it's coming off the bench or starting. He's been able to adapt. You said it, chameleon, right? You adapt to your environment. And, it's a lot of players aren't able to do that. There's some that can, but I think a guy like Rudy Gay has definitely figured out the fact that his passion for the game has turned him into this guy that just says, what do you need? Right? He's got great size. He's got great scoring ability still. Defensively, he's long. So he just needs to find that place, right? I mean, when I went to Minnesota, coming from Utah, having this major role that I played for years, and now you put me on a team that says, well, we're not going to probably get to the playoffs for another, 6, 7, whatever. So we're going to try to build that up. And
that's 16.
So my role.
Did you say 16 or 17 years? Or did you say 6 or 7?
It's 6 or 7, but I probably meant 16 or 17. You're a dog. So, I think Rudy has just, throughout the course of his career, been able to make that adaptation, that to try to figure out where he fits in on the team.
What does he do for us?
Well, he just gives us another score. He gives us the ability to when teams decide to not have a similar big and they're 5-man or whatever. He gives us the ability to be able to have another threat on the court defensively. I think he's shown that in his career, and within the Jazz's philosophy, he could still give you a night that he has 15, 20, not just a night, but multiple nights where he comes in and he can board, he can D up, he can use that length to disrupt what the other team's doing. But now I think you've got a bigger guy who can score in the paint, and it's not at the basket, right? It's at the free throw line, or it's right at the top of the key, or 3-pointer. So scoring is obviously paramount in this league. You got to have people that can score. And so when you limit guys like Donovan, and the ball's not moving, the blender's not going, you've got a guy like Rudy Gay who can manufacture some points in his own way in a game.
About 30% of his games last year, he dropped 15 or more. Like, pretty decent number. All right, Donovan Mitchell. What should we expect? What's his next step? Where is he heading? That's what we do tomorrow with Thurl Bailey here on Locked On Jazz.